Will you go ahead to the Aventine and more highly red in the night? Dirt under my shoe from the old light hall, right under you, grinning in the dark.
I'd just taken her tea up this morning when she said, "Graham, I think the world of you." I said, "I think the world of you." And she said, "That's all right then." I said, "What's brought this on?" She said, "Nothing. This tea looks strong. Pull the curtains." Of course I knew what had brought it on. She said, "I wouldn't like you to think you're not number one." So I said, "Well, you're number one with me too. Give me your teeth, I'll swill them." What it was, we'd had a spot of excitement yesterday. We ran into a bit of Mother's past. I said to her, "I didn't know you had a past. I thought I was your past." She said, "You?" I said, "Well, we go back a long way. How does he fit in vis-a-vis Dad?" She laughed. "Oh, he was pre-Dad." I said, "Pre-Dad? I'm surprised you remember him. You don't remember to switch your blanket off." She said, "That's different. His name's Turnbull." I said, "I know," he said. I'd parked her by the War Memorial on her usual seat while I went and got some reading matter. Then I waited while she went and spent a penny in the disabled toilet. She's not actually disabled, her memory's bad, but she says she prefers their toilets because you get more elbow room. She always takes forever, diddling her hands and whatnot. When she eventually comes back, it turns out she's been chatting to the attendant. I said, "What about?" She said, "Hanging." She was in favour of stiffer penalties for minor offences. And I thought, well, we know better, our Graham and me. I wish you'd been there, love. You could have given her the statistics. Where are we going for our tea? The thing about Mam is that though she's never had a proper education, she's picked up enough from me to be able to hold her own in discussions about up-to-the-minute issues like the environment and the colour problem. And for a woman of her age and background, she has a very liberal slant. She'll look at my Guardian and she actually thinks for herself. Dr. Chowdhury said to me, "Full marks, Graham. The best way to avoid a broken hip is to have a flexible mind. Keep up the good work." They go mad round the War Memorial, so when we cross over, I'll generally slip my arm through hers until we're safely across. Only once we're on the pavement, she'll postpone letting it go. Because once upon a time, we got stopped by one of these questionnaire women who reckons to take us for husband and wife. I mean, Mam's got white hair. She was doing this dodge and I said, "Mam, let go of my arm." I didn't really wrench it, only next thing I knew, she's flat on the pavement. I said, "Oh my God, Mother." People gather round and I pick up her bag and she sits up and says, "I've laddered both my stockings." I said, "Never mind your stockings, what about your pelvis?" She said, "It's these bifocals. They tell you not to look down. I was avoiding some sick." Somebody says, "That's a familiar voice." And there's a little fellow bending over, green trilby hat, shorty raincoat. "Hello," he says. "Remember me?" Well, she doesn't remember people. I know for a fact, because she swore me down she'd never met Joy Buckle, who teaches flowers in felt and fabric at my day centre. I said, "You have met Joy. You knitted her a tea cosy." That's all she can knit, tea cosies. And bed socks. Both outmoded articles. I say to her, "Branch out. If you can knit tea cosies, you can knit skiing hats." She says, "Well, I will. Only I have to stand over her, or else she'll still leave a hole for the spout." Anyway, I said, "You do remember Joy because you said she has some shocking eyebrows." She said, "I hope you didn't tell her that." I said, "Of course I didn't." She said, "Well, I don't remember." And that's the way she is. She doesn't remember. And here's this little fellow saying, do you remember me? So I said, no, she won't. Come on, Mother, let's get you up. Only she says, remember you? Of course it's Frank Turnbull. It must be 50 years. He said 52, Filey, 1934. She said, Seacrest. He said, no sand in the bedrooms, and they both cracked out laughing. Meanwhile, she's still stuck on the cold pavement. I said, come along, Mother, we don't want piles. Only he butts in again. He says, with respect, it's advisable not to move a person until it's been ascertained no bones are broken. I was in the St. John's Ambulance Brigade. Yes, said Mother, and who did you learn your bandaging on? And they both burst out laughing again. He had on these bright yellow gloves. Could have been a bookie. Eventually, I get my arms around her waist and hoist her up. Only his lordship's no help, as he claims to have a bad back. When I've finally got her restored to the perpendicular, she introduces him. This is Frank Turnbull, a friend of mine from the old days. What old days? First time I knew there were any old days. Turns out he's a gents outfitter, semi-retired, shop in Bradford, and some sort of outlet in Morecambe. I thought, well, that accounts for the yellow gloves. Straight off he takes charge. He says, what you need now, Vera, is a cup of coffee. I said, well, we were just going for some tea, weren't we, Mother? Vera? Her name's not Vera. She's never been called Vera. My dad never called her Vera, except just once, when they were wheeling him into the theatre. Vera, right, he says, follow me. And put his arm through hers. Careful, she says. You'll make my boyfriend jealous. I didn't say anything. Now the cafe we generally patronise is just that bit different. It's plain, but it's classy. No cloths on the tables, the menu comes on a little slate, and the waitresses wear their own clothes, and look as if they're doing it just for the fun of it. The stuff's all homemade, and we're both big fans of the date and walnut bread. I said, this is the place. Mr. Turnbull goes straight past. No, he says, I know somewhere just opened. Press on. Now, if there's one thing Mother and me are agreed on, it's that red is a common colour. And the whole place is done out in red. Lampshades red, waitresses in red, plates red, and on the tables, those plastic sauce things got up to look like tomatoes, also red. And when I look, there's a chip in the sugar. I thought, Mother won't like this. Oh, she says, this looks cheerful, doesn't it, Graham? I said, there's a chip in the sugar. A detail, he says. They're still having their teething troubles. Is it 3 coffees? I said, we like tea. Only Mother says, no, I feel like an adventure. I'll have coffee. She gets hold of the menu and he puts a hand on hers. Might I suggest, he says, a cheeseburger? She says, oh, what's that? He said it's fresh country beef, mingled with golden fried onions, topped off with toasted cheese, served with French fries and lemon wedge. Oh, lemon wedge, said Mother. That sounds nice. I thought, well, I hope you can keep it down, because it'll be the pizza story all over again. One mouthful, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was still stuck at a bedside with a bucket. She said, I like new experiences in eating. I had a pizza once, didn't I, Graham? I didn't say anything. They fetched their food, and she's wiring in. He said, are you enjoying your cheeseburger? She said, I am. Would I be mistaken in thinking that's tomato sauce? He says, it is. She says, give us a squirt. They both burst out laughing. He said, glass cups, Graham. Be careful or we'll see up your nose. More laughter. She said, Graham is quite refined. He often has a dry sherry. Well, he could do with smartening up a bit, Mr. Turnbull said. Plastic Mac He wants one of those quilted jobs. I've shifted a lot of those. I don't like those quilted jobs, I said. He sweats, Mother said. There's no excuse for that in this day and age, Mr. Turnbull said. The range of preparations there are on the market. You want to invest in some roll-on deodorant. Everybody could hear. And flares are anathema, even in Bradford. Graham doesn't care, do you, Graham? Mother said he reads a lot. So what, Mr. Turnbull said. I know several big readers who still manage to be men about town. Lovett Green's a nice shade. I'll tell you this, Graham, he said. If I were squiring a young lady like this around town, I wouldn't do it in grey socks and sandals. These shoes are Italian. Feel. I always think Graham would have made a good parson, Mother said, feeling his foot. Only he doesn't believe in God. That's no handicap these days, Mr. Turnbull said. What do you do? He's between jobs at present, Mother said. He used to do soft toys for handicapped children. Then he was making paper flowers at one stage. I went to the toilet. When I came back, he said, I don't believe in mental illness. 9 times out of 10, it's a case of pulling your socks up. I didn't say anything. Mother said, yes, well, I think the pendulum's gone too far. She didn't look at me. It's like these girls, not eating. He said, they'd eat if they'd been brought up like us, Vera. Nothing to eat. That's right, Mother said. They have it too easy. Did you marry? Twice, he said. I buried Amy last May. I was heartbroken, but life has to go on. I've a son lives in Stevenage. I've got 2 grandsons, one at the motorbike stage. Do you drive? No, I said. You do, Mother said. You had that scooter. It was only a moped, I said. Well, a moped, Graham, they're all the same. I can't get him to blow his own trumpet. I've got a Rover 2000, Mr. Turnbull said. Handles like a dream. I think the solution to mental illness is hard physical work. Making raffia mats, I'd go mad. Yes, says Mother. Only they do pottery as well. I've seen some nice ashtrays. Feather bedding, Mr. Turnbull said. Do you like these Pakistanis? Well, in moderation, Mother said. We have a nice newsagent. Graham thinks we're all the same. I said, I thought you did. She said, well, I do when you explain it all to me, Graham, but then I forget the explanation and I'm back to square one. There is no explanation, Mr. Turnbull said. They sell mangoes in our post office. What explanation is there for that? I know, Mother said. I smelled curry on my woman's own. You have to be educated to understand. I didn't say anything. He ran us home, promised to give her a tinkle next time he was in the neighbourhood. Said he was often round here tracking down 2-tone cardigans. Your mother's a grand woman, he said. You want to cherish her. He does, Mother said. You're my boyfriend, aren't you, Graham? She put her arm through mine. There must be a famine on somewhere, because we were just letting our midday meal go down when the vicar calls with some envelopes. Breezes in, anorak and running shoes, and he says, I always look forward to coming to this house, Mrs. Whittaker. He's got the idea she's deaf, which she's not. It's one of the few things she isn't. He says, do you know why? It's because you two remind me of Jesus and his mother. Well, I've always thought Jesus was a bit offhand with his mother, and on one occasion I remember he was quite snotty with her. But I didn't say anything. Of course, Madam is over the moon. In her book, if you can't get compared with the Queen Mother, the Virgin Mary's the next best thing. She says, are you married? She asks him every time, never remembers. He said, no, Mrs. Whittaker, I am married to God. She says, where does that leave you with the housework? He said, well, I don't do as well as your Graham. He's got this place like a palace. She says, well, I do my whack. I washed 4 pairs of stockings this morning. She hadn't. She'd put them in the bowl, then they slipped her mind. So the rest of the operation devolved on me. He said, how are you today, Mrs. Whittaker? She says, stiff down one side. I said, she had a fall yesterday. She says, I never did. I said, you did, Mother. You had a fall, then you ran into Mr. Turnbull. She says, that's right, I did. And she starts rooting in her bag for her lipstick. She says, that's one of them Anaraki things, isn't it? They've gone out now, those. If you want to look like a man about town, you want to get one of those continental quilts. He said, oh? I said, she means those quilted jackets. She said, he knows what I mean. Where did you get those shoes? He said, they're training shoes. She said, training for what? Are you not fully qualified? He said, if Jesus were alive today, Mrs. Whittaker, you'd find these were the type of shoes he would be wearing. Not if his mother had anything to do with it, she said. She'd have him down Stead & Simpson's and get him into some strong, good brogues. Somebody was telling me the Italians make good shoes. The vicar takes this as his cue to start on about people who have no shoes at all, and via this to the famine in Ethiopia. I fork out 50 pence, which he says will feed 6 families for a week. And she says, well, it would have brought me some Quality Street. When he's at the door, he says, I take my hat off to you, Graham. I've got a mother myself. When I get back in, she said, Vicar, he looked more like the paper boy. How can you look up to somebody in pumps? Just then, there's a knock at the door. Get down, she said, he's back. Only it isn't. It's Mr. Turnbull. New outfit this time. Little suede coat, corduroy collar, maroon trousers. She says, you're colourful. We just happen to have these slacks on offer, he says. I was wondering whether you fancied a run out to Bolton Abbey. Bolton Abbey, she says. Ooh, that's right up our street, isn't it, Graham? Graham's good with buildings, aren't you, Graham? He knows all the periods of houses. There's one period that's just come in. Other people don't like it yet, but we do, don't we, Graham? I don't know. I said, you do? What is it? Victorian. I said, that's it, Victorian. Oh, then there's a lot been pulled down. Mr. Turnbull yawns. I've got a little bungalow. That's nice, Mother says. I like a nice bungalow, don't you, Graham? Yes, I said, provided it's not a blot on the landscape. Mine's architect design, said Mr. Turnbull. It has a patio and a breakfast bar. It overlooks a beauty spot. Oh, said Mother, sounds tip-top. We'd better be getting our skates on, Graham. He said, I've got to pick up a load of green 3/4 length wind cheaters in Ilkley. There won't really be room for a third party. Isn't there anything on at the pictures? Oh, he'll be happy reading, Mother said, won't you, Graham? Anyway, Mr. Turnbull said, you don't always want to be with your mother at your age, do you, Graham? I didn't say anything. I've been laid on my bed reading one of my magazines. I've a feeling that somebody is looking at the house, only I can't see anybody. Once or twice I think I've had a knock on the door, but I haven't gone in case there's nobody there. Today they went over to York. It was after 7 when he dropped her off. He generally comes in, but not this time. Just gives her a little kiss. She has to bend down. I said, have you had a good time? She said, yes. We had egg and chips, tea, bread and butter. We've got a lot in common, and there's a grand new car park. I said, did you go in the Minster? She said, no, Frank's not keen on old buildings. We need to look to the future, he says. They've built a spanking new precinct in Bradford, so that's going to be next on the agenda. You're quiet. I said, well, do you wonder? Dr. Chowdhury says I should have a stable environment. This isn't a stable environment with your fancy men popping in every 5 minutes. She said, he isn't my fancy man. I said, well, he is your fancy man in embryo. She said, you know I don't know what that means. I said, how old are you? She said, I don't know. I said, you do know. She said, I don't. Tell me. I said, you're 72. That's not old. How old was Winston Churchill? I said, when? She said, you think you've got it over me, Graham Whittaker? Well, I'll tell you something. My memory's better with Frank. He was telling me about the economy. You've got it all wrong. I said, how? I can't remember, but you have. Blaming it on the government. Frank says it's the blacks. I didn't say anything. Just came upstairs. When I went down again, she still sat there with a hat and coat on. I said, do you want to knit him a tea cosy? She said, I don't think he's the tea cosy type. When I first knew him, he had a motorbike and sidecar. Besides, I think it's got beyond the tea cosy stage. I said, what do you mean? She said, Graham, my one aim in life is for you to be happy. If I thought that by dying I would make you happy, I would. I said, Mother, your dying wouldn't make me happy. In fact, the reverse. It would make me unhappy. Anyway, Mother, you're not going to die. She said, no, I'm not going to die. I'm going to get married. And the honeymoon is in Tenerife. Have one of your tablets. She made a cup of tea. I said, how can you go to Tenerife? You're smothered at Scarborough. She said, it's a 4-star hotel with tip-top air conditioning. You get your breakfast from a long table. I said, what about your bowels? She said, what about my bowels? Well, you said they were unpredictable at Morecambe. Get them to the Canary Islands and they're going to be all over the place. She said, who's going to the Canary Islands? I'm going to Tenerife. And what about post-Tenerife? Where are you going to live? She said, here. Frank says he'll be away on and off on business, but he wants to call this home. I said, what about me? She went into the kitchen. Well, we wondered whether you'd prefer to go back to the hostel. You were happy at the hostel. You rubbed shoulders with all sorts. I said, Ma'am, this is my home. She said, a man shouldn't be living with his mother at your age. Frank says, did you take a tablet? Now it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep. There's a car parked outside. I can't see, but I think there's somebody in it, watching like they used to do before. I thought all that chapter was closed. This morning, I went to community caring down at the health centre. It caters for all sorts. Steve, who runs it, is dead against what he calls the ghetto approach. What he's after is a nice mix of personality difficulties as being the most fruitful exercise in problem solving and a more realistic model of society generally. There's a constant flow of coffee, oiling the wheels, Steve calls it, and we're all encouraged to ventilate our problems and generally let our hair down. I sometimes feel a bit out of it, as I've never had any particular problems. So this time, when Steve says, now chaps and chapesses, who's going to set the ball rolling? I get in quick and tell them about Mother and Mr. Turnbull. When I'd finished, Steve said, "Thank you, Graham, for sharing your problem with us. Does anybody want to kick it around?" First off the mark is Leonard, who wonders whether Graham has sufficiently appreciated that old people can fall in love and have meaningful relationships generally, the same as young people. I suppose this is understandable coming from Leonard, because he's 65, only he doesn't have meaningful relationships. He's been a had up for exposing himself in Sainsbury's doorway, and Mother says, "Tesco, you could understand it." Then Janice chips in. Had they been having sexual intercourse? I said I didn't like to think about it. Steve said, "Why?" I said I didn't know. So he said, "Maybe what we should be talking about is why Graham is being so defensive about sexual intercourse." I said, "Steve, I'm not being defensive about sexual intercourse. She is my mother." Jackie, who's 9 parts lesbian, said, "Graham, she's also a woman." I couldn't believe this. I said, "Jackie, you're an ex-battered wife. I thought you didn't approve of marriage." She said, "Graham, I approve of caring marriage." I said, "Jackie, this is not caring marriage." She said, "Graham, what's Tenerife? That's caring. All I got was a black eye and a day trip to Fleetwood." Then they all have a go. Get Graham. Steve summed up. The general feeling of the group is that Graham could be more open. I said, "How can I be more open?" There's somebody sat outside the house watching. I wanted to discuss that, only Leonard leapt in and said he felt the need to talk through an episode behind British Home Stores. I stuck it a bit longer, then came home. Mother sat there, all dolled up, earrings on, chiffon scarf, lathered in makeup. She said, "Oh, I thought you were Mr. Turnbull." I said, "No." She said, "I'll just go to the lav." She goes 3 times in the next 10 minutes. I said, "You're not getting married today, are you?" She said, "No, there's a new Asda superstore opened at Bingley, and we thought we'd give it the once over." Frank says they have a very good selection of suntan lotions. I said, "Mother, there's somebody watching the house." She said, "I want to pick out some tissues and Frank's looking for a little chamois for his windscreen. He's promised me something called a cheeseburger. There's a cafe that's part of the complex." Just then there's a little toot on the horn, and she runs to the lav again. I said, "Don't go. Don't leave me, ma'am." She said, "I'm not giving in to you. You're a grown man. Is my underskirt showing?" He toots again. She says, "Look at your magazines. Make yourself a poached egg." I said, "Ma'am." She said, "There's a bit of chicken in the fridge. You could iron those 2 vests. Take a tablet. Give us a kiss. Toodle pip." I thought I'd go and sit in the back room where they couldn't see me. I pulled the curtains and I'm sitting there in the dark, and I think I hear a knock at the front door. I don't move, and there's another knock, louder. I do like Dr. Chowdhury says and tell myself it's not happening, only it is. Somebody shouts through the letterbox, "I know you're in there, open this door." So I do, and there is someone. It's a woman. She said, "Are you the son?" I said, "What?" She said, "Are you the son? I'm the daughter." I said, "Have you been watching the house?" She said, "On and off, why?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "I don't know what there is to look so suited about." I said, "You'd better come in." It's 9 o'clock when I hear the car outside. I'm sitting watching TV. I say, "Oh, hello. Did you have a nice time?" She said, Yes, we did, thank you." "Did you get your suntan lotion?" She said, what suntan lotion? You were going to get some suntan lotion. Never mind, you've forgotten. How's Mr. Turnbull? Frank, he's all right. She took her things off. I'm sure you could get to like him, Graham, if only you got to know him. I said, well, you should have brought him in. Well, I will next time. It'd be nice if now and again we could go off as a threesome. What have you done? Nothing, I said. Just sat here. You've been all right? You see, she said, there wasn't anybody outside. Oh, yes, there was. She said, oh, Graham, have you had a tablet? Have a tablet. I don't want a tablet. I'll tell you who was sat outside, Mrs. Pamela Musgrave. She said, who's she? Nee Turnbull, the daughter of your hubby-to-be. She said, he hasn't got a daughter. He's got a son down south. He hasn't got a daughter. She said, you're making stuff up now. Have a tablet. I said, I'm not making it up. And there's something else I'm not making up. Mrs. Turnbull. She said, there isn't a Mrs. Turnbull. She's dead. I'm going to the lav. I said, she's not dead. She's in a wheelchair with a broken heart. He's been having you on. After a bit, she comes out. You're just saying all this. The numbers on the pad ring up. She's disabled, is his wife. Has been for 10 years. Their daughter looks after them. You're not the first. He's always doing it. One woman, it was going to be Barbados. Somebody spotted you together at Bolton Abbey. A well-wisher. Tenerife. Later on, I took her a cup of tea. She'd been crying. She said, I bought this little bed jacket. I said, I'm sorry, ma'am. She said, he was right enough. What can you expect at my age? How old am I? 72? That's another thing. I remembered with him. I don't remember with you. I said, I'm sorry. She said, you're not sorry. How are you sorry? You didn't like him. I said, he wasn't good enough for you. She said, I'm the best judge of that. He was natty, more than could be said for you. And she starts crying again. I said, I understand, ma'am. She said, you don't understand. How can you understand? You're not normal. I said, I'm going to bed. In a bit, she comes shouting outside the door. You think you've got it over me, Graham Whittaker? Well, you haven't. I've got it over you. I said, go back to bed. She said, I know the kind of magazines you read. I said, chess. You'll catch cold. She said, there never are chess. Chess with no clothes on. Chess in their birthday suits. That kind of chess. Chess men. I said, go to bed and turn your blanket off. Next day she's right as rain. Forgotten it. Never mentions it anyway. Except just as we're coming out of the house, she said, I do love you, Graham. I said, I love you too. She said, anyway, he had a hearing aid. She said, what's on the agenda for today then? I said, I thought we might have a little ride to Ripon. She said, oh yes, Ripon. That's nice. We could go to the cathedral. We like old buildings, don't we, you and me? She put her arm through mine.